In yesterday's voting for City Council, only one incumbent was displaced, but the results were otherwise historic, if only for two reasons. For the first time ever, a majority of the councilors will be women and people of color. To share some thoughts on the election is a political consultant and contributor to the Boston Herald, Joyce Ferriabough Bolling. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Talk about the history. I mean, is this as big a deal as it sounds like?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go back to when my husband Bruce was elected in 1981, he was the only black person on the council, and in fact, in this new wave, there are no, when we talk about diversity, there are no black men. But women are still ruling. There are more women, as you rightly said. I think that that's going to give a very kind of different perspective on things when you look at what they bring to the council, not just that they're women, but they bring, a lot of gravitas to the council. And I think that everybody has to thank Ayanna Pressley for that. We had to kind of beat her into submission to run for the seat. She's like, well, I'm working for John Kerry. I'm making good money, and you want me to do what? I just bought a house. But I also think that there's still a lot to be done. And I think that we're seeing, housing being out of reach for a lot of people. And it's not just the poor neighborhoods, it's everywhere. I mean, Doyle's just closed down because they couldn't afford the rent. And that's, a business. So we've got businesses, we've got a lot of opportunity to just change the way things have operated.
Well, it's interesting. There is a property owners group that's opposed to rent control. 3 out of 4 of the people that they liked got elected yesterday. And then there's a group, Right to the City, which is a lot more receptive to things like rent control. And 9 out of 10 of their candidates got elected. So what do you think that's going to be next year?
Well, I'm hoping that, there's that rent control is looked at again. I think that I remember when I went to work for Bruce back in 1982, and I remember speaking to my friend Lou Fenfer, and he said, this is his last term, because he was against rent control at the time. I think that what I like about the new crew is that they are willing to look at things that haven't worked in the past, but might work now and in the future. And I think that rent control is, good to look at. And the last forum that I went to, everyone, I think with the exception of Anissa Asabi George, supported looking at it. Nobody said implementing or anything. They said looking at it. And also, my personal is that wish is that we, honor democracy by returning to an elected school committee. With all due respect to those people who say, well, there's been stability, well, that's not what we want the schools to be. We want them to be excellent. There hasn't been much of that over the last 25 years under an appointed school committee. And,
now, as much as I find myself craving more openness about school business, I do remember the time, and maybe you do, when Kevin White was the mayor, and when things were going downhill in the schools, he would say, don't blame me, I can't control the schools, it's the school committee's fault. I mean, couldn't we possibly risk going back to something like that?
Well, let me just say that I think that looking at things with a different mindset, with different eyes, is valuable. There's nothing wrong with going back and looking at what didn't work and 25 years and just saying, okay, well, maybe we can do this or we can do that to make sure it works. The goal is, not a control thing. I mean, why should we be under, the control of every mayor? Just like you gave that example about Kevin saying, hey, don't, even Menino, very close, he did incremental steps, which we need bigger, giant steps in our schools. And so I think that we don't want to leave the business of the schools, to the whim of any mayor. I think democracy still rules out. And it was on my husband's bucket list that he'd like to see us go. After he was talking about, oh, let's do a hybrid, he said, look, this is not working. We need to, go back to an elected school committee. And Bruce was the most negotiating person around. So I'm hoping that that's the case.
This is BNN News. We're talking with political consultant Joyce Ferriabough Bolling. Joyce, I want to come back to how we got to the results yesterday, because one of the things I certainly noticed, it's not just that these women were running separately as candidates on their own merits. They were doing things together, and then you had Ayanna Pressley coming out and endorsing people. I mean, wasn't there a chemistry going on with this too?
Well, there really was. One of the things I think that people, running, women that I know who were running, folks wanted to have representation from everyone. And so having a Hispanic woman on the council, it was very important. Having a gay person on the council was important. And so I think that there was a kind of rally around diversity in a lot of different ways. And I know people said to me, well, why is Ayanna endorsing, in this race? Well, Ayanna can do what she wants to do. And I think that kind of made a difference. I think that, in whatever way it turns out, and I know there's a recount because of how close Alejandra and Julia came. I think it was 10 votes. Whichever way that goes, we're going to have a phenomenal person, and then we're going to have somebody in the 5th seat. So, Althea, you're going to have to really run a race this time. And
this was a race in which we had 3 Latina candidates running. 2 of them won, whichever it turns out to be.
Sure, 3 of them
Doesn't that
won.
build up the turnout in a way, maybe, at least in that part of the electorate?
Exactly. In fact, I wrote a column about that after the preliminary, that a lot of people, sort of came out because of that. And in particular, I'm very happy also that Felix,
Ricardo Arroyo.
Yes. I don't care what anybody says, and there's been a lot of cheap shots, but the Arroyo family is synonymous with public service, as you know. 2 served in the council, 1 now serves as Register of Deeds. And Ricardo is exceptional as a public servant. I mean, he's just not a public defender. He's helped people along the way. So I was really very happy about it. I was very not happy about the shenanigans of the very bright Tim McCarthy when he
made these adversarial comments about women, people of color.
Well, I didn't know what he was talking about. I think he might have had a couple of beers too many or something, but it was just very weird, where he said, well, we ran against the women, we ran against minorities, and we had the boots on the ground. Well, I mean, whose boots were on the ground? I thought Ricardo's opponent was gracious. I thought she had a lot to bring. I thought he screwed it up for her with his
well, he had to
bombastic.
distance himself from her just to sort of.
Well, he couldn't distance himself from the pictures, and, the pictures were all, the former guys and all the white guys in the area.
Interesting. I did go to Arroyo's celebration for a little while last night. I heard a couple of cheers for nonsense people, but I also heard Ricardo himself talk a lot about bridges to the past and the continuity, and so I mean, he didn't sound adversarial at all. He was just the exact opposite.
Well, that's why you want somebody like him in that seat, because he's open, because he's kind of a universal guy. We've been working for a very long time to rework the 5th district. And I'm saying that with the redistricting committee. As you know, I was the president of the Black Political Task Force when we redistricted the congressional seat that Ayanna won. I mean, it took us some time to do it, but we untangled a few things. And so we have been trying for some time. And when you talk about district representation in a community that's 70% of color, and there's there's really no representation except the old school, the old guys, and nothing's getting done for that population, then it's really not the way that government's supposed to work. And I think he's going to bring that back. It's not going to matter. Color is not going to matter, but he's got work to do, because I don't believe that the growing Hispanic and Haitian community has been well served in that district.
Well, we have a first woman councilor in District 8, Kenzie Bach. In District 9, another kind of first, Liz Breeden, she was running against somebody who worked for a state rep. He looked like he had a bit of an edge, but she has some good things too.
Well, she's, again, this council are a council of activists. I mean, they've been out on the stumps. They've been out on the ground, whether they come from the immigrant community, and even those who didn't win. Erin Murphy is a person who comes to mind. I was very impressed with her when I came to the last debate. She and her parents before her helped to build community. So all of them had that going for them. And I think that you're going to find that this council is not going to be passive about how they go about things. And the other thing I wrote about is that we're lucky to have a collaborative kind of mayor, because as you know, Tom Menino is like, he was like, this is not going to happen. He was more like authoritarian, love him, dictator, kind of like, this is not going to go, this is, and he totally commanded the city council. I think Marty is a different kind of guy. He wants what's best for the city. And if you come up with, a plan that he thinks works, he's going to, support it, as he has with a number of the councilors. And I know there's a lot of focus also on who's going to take him on next time, and I think that that's valid, but I don't know if I think he's worried about it. I think there's only 2 people who could take him on, and that's Michelle Wu and Michael Flaherty, who's been there before.
Well, I know first place isn't a guarantee for 2 years later, but I mean, isn't there something to be said for Wu's, campaign here, the activism, and just engaging people? Oh yeah. I mean, she's been a game changer in terms of some of the things that she's done around transportation, and there are, and she's not afraid to get out there and use the bully pulpit of the council to, state her claim. I remember there was this whole thing about increasing parking fees, and the mayor said, "Oh, wait a minute now, we're not going to do that." But she's been good. I think there needs to be a little bit more to take on, the mayor right now. But we'll see. Time will tell. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Joyce Ferriabough Bolling.